at the meeting 2004 in London, there were representatives at top law level from the operators, the manufacturers, and the insurance companies, and they said that the Dow Corning issue with breast implants and the smoking scandal, that was the very last time any company on this planet ever will face any form of economic liability. And therefore they have put thousands of lawyers to write in their license agreements and so on sentences that clears them completely of any form of responsibility. So therefore the insurance companies and all of these, they are not any longer a target. The target is only one, and that's the society, because society have said, oh yeah, we want to have this. And as you say, we should have a playground that can communicate with the municipality computers and so on. So they really are the ones responsible. So I think one has to identify the responsible persons and go for their necks. And just one example, which was very interesting this year, in England, there was a parental movement group who asked a simple question: if my child is harmed in a wireless school, who is then responsible now and in the future? And an email conversation went up and down. In Sweden we call them rektor, the headmasters of each school. And now the funny thing happened. When that was announced publicly, several headmasters immediately quit their job. Because even if we are in England, it will cost money if you are found liable in a court of law as a headmaster. And I talked with one which I know very well myself. I called him and I said, are you going to quit? Yes, I am, he said. But it's not about the economy. But I don't want to retire knowing that I have harmed a child in my school. I don't want to have that on my conscience. I don't bother about the money, he said. It's a conscious matter. It's a matter of moral and ethics. And I said, Jesus, I've always been impressed by you, but now I'm even more impressed. Because if people always thought about that in that way, then you have this sort of public announcement that, hey, interesting question. I'm not an expert on it, but I've seen some publications that are sort of indicating that it could be an issue. At the same time, of course, radiation of food products, like spices, for instance, could be very effective to kill any hazardous germs and so on. So it's a sort of a balance between too bad or too good, or whatever you should say, And so I don't really know. But it's interesting that you mentioned the mad cow disease, because as you know, and I have written several papers with a Swedish lawyer about this, because then we talk about the precautionary principle. And in the Court of Law of the European Union, it states in layman terms that the suspicion of one single case is enough to arouse attention within the entire European Union and to attract major scale interventions. I mean, we're talking about killing hundreds of thousands of cows and so on, And if the precautionary principle would be applied in the same way on what we know today about health effects of electromagnetic fields, they would all be stopped immediately. Yeah. Nothing would be allowed, Yeah. And, you have to remember that mad cow disease, the knowledge was not very high, and with smoking there was none. But if you print on paper the top 5,000 publications, only them, not all of them, but only the top 5,000, it will form a pile of paper that is somewhere between 5 and 10 meters high, So the knowledge here is enormous. And then still there are so many other papers that are relevant. And while we are talking, my computer goes like this, more and more and more and more, So that's a different situation. No. And with the precautionary principle, we are not talking about the suspicion or single cases. We talk about knowledge and a huge number of potential future cases. And therefore, as I said, in this ship where you are sailing, most of the captains and sailors have left the ship. The manufacturers, the operators, the insurance companies, the radiation protection boards, the World Health Organization, they are not aboard any longer. They say, don't get me wrong, to begin with, when I give lectures, I always tell people, do not trust me. You have to do your own homework. You have to read for yourself. You have paper enough to read. Start reading it, and make up your mind. Should I as a consumer accept this, or should I protest? So that's very important. And also that, people should identify their targets. For instance, I very often meet people who want to move a telecom mast away from something, which is very, unethical, because when I move it away from him, I move it closer to her. So he doesn't want to have it, but she should have it. And therefore I tell people, don't move anything. You should say no to the radiation, to the microwaves. That's what you should do. And instead ask for safe installations like shielded computers, etc. And also finally, don't get me wrong, I want to be wrong. I want everything to be safe. I don't want to have fathers that are scared about their kids. I want them to feel safe, happy, all these fun gadgets, and they should be pedagogically superb and so on, But that would mean that in the order of 25,000, and you remember we have 5,000 papers here, 25,000 papers all have to be wrong at the same time. And that has never, ever happened in science, Single papers could be wrong, but they have gone through a very harsh evaluation called a peer review based process, where a lot of anonymous experts have read the manuscript, and said either it's good, it's bad, or well, you have to do this and that, then we can publish it. And no way they could have missed all of that, so they should be wrong, But I would love to. But I would hate to come to St. Peter at the pearly gates when I'm dead, and he says, Olle, why didn't you speak up? Why didn't you do anything? I want him to say, you did as good as you could. That's it. You failed, but you did as good as you could, And of course, failing is interesting too, because I wouldn't be so engaged in this area if it wasn't for the fact that we don't only jeopardize his children and himself, but we jeopardize all animals, all plants. There are so many studies showing that, for instance, tomato plants, ants, honeybees, rats, mice, cells, molecules should not buy, own and use mobile phones, tablets, etc. Definitely not, because they are very badly damaged, And probably the most scary effect, and now we're coming again to your area actually, is the fact that this year there's a Swede who has received the Nobel Prize in Chemistry on DNA damage and reparation, and non-ionizing radiation like microwaves from towers. They are genotoxic. They destroy the DNA of your cells. And as you know, if it would have been a food item or a pharmaceutical drug or something, it's forbidden according to international law to further develop, manufacture and sell genotoxic products, because that's a nightmare worse than Hollywood if such a thing is let loose in the population. And we already have done it. And even the industry have replicated these findings and found them to be true.